It is Monday the 5th of May, and you are listening to the Four Outsiders Comic Book Podcast brought to you by Skylarky Media. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Four Outsiders Comic Book Podcast. Now, I know I said it was it's Monday the 5th of May, but it's actually in true comic book fashion. Time traveled back to Friday, and I'm drinking a nice rum sour here and talking with these three fine gentlemen about comics. Fellas, how's it been?
It's been great. Can't complain too much.
Yeah, good weather. I'm still here in all one piece, so everything's okay.
Nice comic books to read this week.
A
Kind
few.
of.
I personally found it was a kind of a light week. I wasn't crazy about a lot of the books. It was kind of hard to find something I really wanted to talk about. But,
It was a
what
light
happened,
week for mainstream stuff, but there's some non-DC or Marvel or even Image stuff that I found to be pretty cool this week, and
Yeah,
I
but my
can't wait to
favorite,
talk about it.
yeah, my favorite image books weren't out this week either. But it was a couple of new books. I know we can talk about one or two, but yeah, this wasn't a Batman week either, so that's always a drag. But yeah,
You are such a
I just said that for fun.
It's
I'm
on
a,
a record
I
now.
am,
It's on a public record now. Okay?
no, I am a son of the House of L. Yes,
No, you're not. You're fraud.
yes,
You clearly established as part of the public record that you are a full-blooded Bat stan. Let the
I'm,
record reflect.
I'm a
Let's
man
not
of I'm
forget
a complex
Superman
man.
was. I mean, there is a
Superman what?
comic where Superman was raised by in Wayne family, so you'd be doing both.
Yes, there you go. Speeding bullets, right? I read that. Yeah.
Y'all give me
What?
a break, please.
Why? Why are you giving him an out, Mike? Why?
I
Just
love
say.
both characters. I love both characters.
You love one of them more than the other,
Nah.
and it's not the one that you like to publicly state for the
Nah.
record.
Let's not slander my good name for everybody to hear. So let's just jump right in and begin to talk about the books we might have read this week, what we think about them. So this week, what I most enjoyed, for lack of a better word, was the book I found less boring than all the rest. I wasn't really crazy about it still, but it was Red Coat. Is it number 9? I think it is. By Geoff Johns and Brian Hitch. Johns has been building his own interconnected universe outside of the mainstream DC and Marvel books. What he's given us at the beginning was a timeline of these major events that are supposed to occur in this universe. You got books like Same Red Coat. There's one called Junkyard Joe. What's the radioactive guy's name again? No, Geiger. Yeah, right. These books are all tied in, and one of the points in time that we've seen that we finally got to explore this time was this character called the Northerner, who gives little brief glimpses before, but this was the first issue where he fully appeared. So the story is mainly about the Northerner. It starts with this Confederate soldier getting back to one of the Confederate bases, and he has this information that he says is gonna. Well, let me go back. Red Coat is an immortal British soldier from the Revolutionary War, and he got into some kind of like National Treasure, the movie, kind of shenanigans with George Washington and the Founding Fathers, and he gained this type of immortality, which is a fine type of immortality because he only has immortality within the boundaries of the United States. If he leaves America, he dies. Right? He's a mercenary, the typical lovable rogue, no morals, but still a heart of gold, that kind of guy. Like I said, this one opens up with this Confederate soldier coming back to this Confederate base, and he has this satchel, which he says has information that can change the course of the war, that is gonna put the Confederacy on top and banish the Union and everything. So when he gets there, this little black slave girl, she overhears his conversation and she steals the bag because she knows people that are not Confederate friendly. She knows Union people, and her being a slave, obviously she doesn't want the Confederacy to come on top. These guys chase her and they catch her and they're gonna kill her. But suddenly there's flash of light and this guy appears, a black guy in a Union uniform, And as they're gonna kill her, he attacks them and kills them with 2 automatic pistols, which don't exist in the 1800s. So obviously, we realize now that I was thinking before that maybe Northerner was also an immortal. I don't know, maybe he still might be, but he's clearly a time traveler. There are little hints that he gives as well. He has a Jefferson Davis bill, a US dollar bill. I don't know if it's $1, 2 or 5, but he has a Jefferson Davis bill that he keeps as a bookmark. And Jefferson Davis was only on the bills of the Confederacy money. He's not on US money. So I guess it's a case where he thinks once he says when he's done, he'll know he's done based on the bill. So I guess the bill will either disappear or be replaced by the face of George Washington or something. I don't know. But he mission then at the end of the book is to try to recruit Sigmund Pure to his side because they have to save the United States of America. So we don't really get much more than that. It's just a setup for the story, but I really like it because it tells us who the Northerner is finally. Maybe time travel may be a bit cliche, but Johns does it really well. I really enjoy Johns' writing. He's a real craftsman. Stories are usually like wide in scope, and I can see how all the books are going to come together already. He really takes his time. He gives the characters good voices. Also, I don't know if you remember, if you realize, Gibson, I know you're not necessarily big on art, but you may realize that Brian Hitch is who's drawing this book, and he's been consistent and committed to this, and that's probably why the other book he was doing, The Death of Lex Luthor, was so delayed because he's been working consistently on this for a long time. And Death of Lex Luthor took about 2 years to release. Was it issue 2?
Yeah, everything after issue 1 took like 2 years to come out.
So, like I said, this is a really good. If you haven't been reading Johns' what's the name of the imprint? I don't remember.
Ghost Machine.
Ghost Machine. If you've been reading the Ghost Machine books, you should check it out. It's good old-fashioned comic book fun with modern sensibilities. It's well told, well drawn. Doesn't look cheap at all. Is literally better than 80% of the stuff coming out from Marvel. So give Johns a shot and read the Ghost Machine books. There are about 10 of them, all different types of stories, horror stories, comedic family drama, like Lost in Space type of thing, all kinds of books. So what do you guys read? Cool?
I read this issue. I think this is issue 11. I think I like John's writing. I think he did a fantastic job overall when he was headlining Green Lantern at the DC Comics. I didn't like the fact that he reinstated Hal and later Barry Allen. I think they both should have stayed dead. That would have been better for everybody. I don't like the fact that
Barry, how's he greatest?
Hal is a
The
poozer.
greatest. The greatest.
Hal is a poozer. In the immortal words of Kilowog, Hal is a poozer.
Greatest jail there ever was.
Greatest poozer. Anyway, so
Every
John,
single those human Green Lanterns, ridiculous. Let's just leave it at that.
so I think John's got some credit for me. I haven't really dived into Ghost Machine. I did browse this issue because you were going to talk about it. I like it enough to be curious, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna dive in to either the Red Coat as a series or the wider Ghost Machine imprint. But yeah, it was interesting. At least it's a curiosity. Maybe I'll get more into it later. Who knows?
Fair enough. Glenn, Michael, anything about it?
Man, I like the Ghost Machine stuff. Well, as you know, I've been saying that for quite a while now. Red Coat I find interesting. The immortality stuff was that's interesting as well. But more his attitude and his personality is what gets me. You know, he's the sort of person that you can tell he if you were in contact with him, he would wear you down, like you would be annoyed with him, that kind of stuff. But like in the landscape of main characters, that kind of attitude, it can rub you the wrong way, but it makes for interesting storytelling, that kind of stuff. He's the kind of person that would fit easily in a Dungeons and Dragons type scenario, in my opinion.
Michael?
Personally, I've heard it. I've seen the cover pop up every now and then, but I've never really gotten into it myself. And I don't know if I have any intentions of actually jumping into it at all. I'll just listen to you guys talk about it, and that's enough for me on that one.
Fair enough. I guess it's not really your kind of speed. I get that. That's fine. The reason I rushed through that is because I just want to briefly mention another book. I don't want to take too much time, but it's been simmering and I had thoughts about it, and well, not a lot of thoughts, but I finally decided if I like it or not. I really want to mention Ultimate Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman and Marc Checchetto. They tell me that's how you pronounce Italian names. You don't say the ch, you say ka. I could be wrong. Anyway, I don't like this book. I find, like, I think Glen would have mentioned Hickman is a big picture kind of guy, but his issue to issue work is rough. I find it boring and dry. I think in this whole run, I've seen about 5 punches being thrown. I really like the revelation that happened in this issue. It was really interesting. Like, well, we never saw that coming. It's a really different twist on the character, on that particular character. And I'm glad they're finally tying this book, because they weren't really tying this book into the main story, but they're finally tying this book into what's going on in Ultimates. I'm glad about that because they all pulled together in time for Incursion, the big crossover. But as a standalone title, I think I enjoy Amazing Spider-Man more than this, and that's saying a lot. It's just kind of boring.
No, you see, this is what happens when publishers give fans what they want. Y'all bastards still aren't happy. Here you guys get Peter Parker married to Mary Jane Watson,
But that's
You-
not all there is to it.
family,
Not
he
there
has
is to it.
children, and you're calling it boring? Come on, man. What else do you want?
Where's
This
the
is
action?
literally
Move at a
action.
snail's pace. A snail's pace.
It is a slow burn, and
Not,
last
not Mark,
episode,
not Mark out here trying to bait people. Come on, bro.
You know,
Yeah, I get what
Opinion of
Wade
you.
is saying. I get what Wade is saying, because if you really sit down, right, and you reflect on Hickman's work, anything that he's done for Marvel, they've never really been like action stuff. Yeah, there's some like real big action set pieces, like, you know, in Fantastic Four, there's an awesome bit with the Celestials and stuff like that. But in terms of like, you know, regular superhero action, regular action, nah, it's very cerebral. Lots of setup, lots of world building, lots of character work, lots of, you know, history and that sort of stuff. But in terms of action, it tends to run pretty low on that.
No, because ironically, I have the opposite opinion of you, Wade, when it comes to the Ultimate Spider-Man, because I actually quite enjoy it. I like the slow burn effect of it and stuff, and seeing him actually thriving and doing better than being. I mean, yeah, the Amazing Spider-Man have all the niceness, the punch up, the action, and all of that. But then at the end of the day, he goes home broken alone. Again, I'm tired of seeing that. I love watching him do the slow burn stuff and actually building up and caring about his family. I love watching the little things, like that whole part where he was just on the rooftop doing a stakeout and he was there so long, the man was eating lunch with pigeons. That shit was funny and hilarious to me. I loved watching him, you know, interact with his daughter, and she was the one that picked out his outfit for him. I love seeing that stuff because that is actual real progression to me in a character than watching him punch somebody for the umpteenth time and then go home miserable.
well, fair enough. But if I wanted to see that, I would watch The Bold and the Beautiful or The Young and the Restless or something. I don't need all that drama. If drama's fine, but they got to balance it. And Hickman doesn't balance. Hickman is all
Wait,
setup and world building, and
you,
as Glenn said,
but you
it's very slow.
so I'm honestly between Mike and Wade. I appreciate the character work, the character development, how character driven Ultimate Spider-Man is. I could really do without Mary Jane Watson, but we've already covered that. I really liked his family, the children, Richard and crap. What was the daughter's name again? I don't remember.
Don't think it's made, but I can't remember.
I
Let me look
like.
it up.
Is it Annie? Okay, Annie, are you okay? But yeah, I like that. You know, I like all that
Yes, that
character work.
was really a joke. Oh,
I would love a bit more action, but you know, the character development is pretty strong. The world building, like Glenn said, is pretty strong. The pacing could be a bit more upkey, and I really think that they're decompressing it a lot for this whole crossover return of the Maker event. But when doesn't Marvel decompress stories that they don't need to? You know?
Well, Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I'm not as big into Spider-Man as you guys are. But I tend to get the sense that Spider-Man stories tend to be like pretty kinetic.
That's right, Glen. He's not a character that. When I heard that Hickman was writing Ultimate Spider-Man, I was like, Hickman? That's not his kind of character. It was strange to me. I said, but maybe he got something up his sleeve. Let me see. But he's writing it just like he's writing X-Men or the whole Krakoa thing. That same kind of slow build-up. He doesn't have as much characters to work with, and it's a whole different vibe. But his style doesn't suit. I like him doing. I don't know if you ever read the Manhattan Projects, where it was this the guys that built the atomic bomb were actually working on all kinds of other secret weird stuff, and that's the kind of thing like I see him doing. Big ideas, far out ideas. I could even see him doing a New Gods book, that kind of cosmic stuff. But something that is grounded and basic as Spider-Man, it doesn't work for me. But I'm still reading it. I'm gonna still read it, but I'm not a big
Hickman,
fan. I tried.
you need to put Hickman on Silver Surfer or
Yes,
Doctor Strange.
yes, those will work. Let me not take any more time with my extra rambling. So we got to get on, you guys. Who's going next?
I'll go
If
next.
anybody don't,
All right. So the book that I was on today, that was Lost Fantasy. It was written by Kurt Pyers, and the artist is Luca Casalanguida. I hope I'm saying this right. So I was attracted to it just by the cover, to be honest. There's this giant golem on the cover and a white-haired dude with a buster sword looking like straight out of Final Fantasy. I didn't do any read up on it, so I just plunged into it, just, straight off the cuff. And it had me hooked from the first page. There was a little girl running through the woods, trying to figure out what's going on. She's bloody. She looks tired. And by the next panel, she runs into a guy. She doesn't get to say much before, bam, the guy is like sliced in half. And then she's running for her life again. Only to make it onto the road, get hit by a car, and she's in a coma. It seems like there's a convergence going on. There's another world beneath ours, and a portal opens every now and again, and monsters come out. The concept is kind of like solo leveling in that respect, where the portal opens and the monsters come out. And it seems like there are heroes within that realm or within ours who come out and battle these monsters, close the convergences. It happens. Those heroes, they get global recognition, or at least recognition from the first world countries, and a sort of accord is struck between them, and they continue fighting these monsters, and eventually some houses are established amongst them. So the more prominent characters, more prominent heroes, they sort of have like a bloodline thing. They get established houses in different countries: Japan, Europe, North America, that sort of stuff. And they train persons to combat these monsters. And that was like 100 years ago. We're now in the modern, and we get to see, well, we follow one of the legacies. And he is the dude with the white hair, the Buster Blade. He has a connection to like the dark, old, ancient magic. And so nothing is really explained beyond that history. Everything remains a mystery. Like, who is the guy that puts our main character on the call to go out and research what has happened, this incident that has happened? And he goes out in this backwater place, finds out about the girl. He pulls out a card. He's apparently working for the FBI, whatever sector that he's a part of is a part of the FBI. And so he goes out, assisted by local police. Kind of, well, they were hesitant to do so. It feels like there's a connection here, like the local police knows kind of what's going on or have some sort of connection with what's going on, because they were talking about resolving things themselves, and they don't like outsiders, yada yada, the kind of hillbilly talking. That's what we have going on here. But he goes out, shakes the police officer, and then we see something pretty cool happens. He has a dragon tattoo on his neck, and that comes alive, and out comes two glowing giant dragons with a potty mouth. And I was not expecting that. Those dragons had anything but reverent attitudes. And I thought that was absolutely amazing. And from there, he gets jumped by creatures, you know. But I don't want to reveal too much more in terms of what went on. But needless to say, the interaction I found to be interesting. The fact that they're utilizing like classic fantasy elements mixed in with some of modern writing that we see appearing in like the manhwa and the manga and sort of stuff. It felt to me kind of like that stuff that we read with Dan Mora with the Arthurian legends and stuff like that. It
Oh,
had some elements of that.
yeah, what was that called? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's at the tip of my tongue. I can't recall, but it has elements of that as well included. And I like the setting. They call those states again flyover states. Like nobody goes there. It's very backwater kind of vibe. You know.
Sorry, Glenn.
Uh,
Once and Future. That was it.
yes.
Once and
Once
Future.
and future.
Yeah.
So it has a bit of once and future to it. It also has a bit of oh gosh, what's the name of that one again? The one that we like there with was it Hitch? That was the artist on there by Mark Millar with the Jupiter's Legacy. It
Yeah, I
has
can see that.
I can see a bit of Jupiter's Legacy. So a bit of Jupiter's Legacy, a bit of Once and Future, a bit of Southern Bastards from Jason Aaron. It's a nice mixed match of these things, and it's yeah, it's pretty cool. Ties into other stories apparently. It was like Indigo Children, I think it was. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to the next issue. I'm glad that I read it. It's definitely different from what we've seen out there. And yes, I agree with you, Wade. This week has been a pretty slow week in terms of what to choose, what to read, interest. Yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, I think I made the same mistake you made. I think it was a mistake, could be wrong. But the back half of the book where the Indigo children's story, I think that's just a preview for the new Indigo children's book. When I read it, I was half asleep. I thought it was the same story being continued because it looked pretty similar, but I think it's actually just a preview for their book. They have a prequel book coming up. Yeah. But yeah, I like this book a
Yeah,
lot
I
too.
did notice.
Yeah. It threw me off.
Yeah, I was saying I did notice that the bit at the end of the book came from book 6, the last book in Indigo Children.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait for that too. But yeah, I liked this book. I like the whole hidden world thing. I love a hidden world story. So it was cool seeing that play out and how the worlds mixed and how they found out us and how it always interests me how I think about how we would react to something like that happening in real life. And the main character, I interested in his backstory because if you remember, he was a foundling in the forest. I think the guy from the house, they found him as a baby, so they don't know who he is. He said that he has the old magic. So I want to see what he's about. But yeah, good action. Unlike Hickman, I'm saying there was good world building in this as well. It was well balanced out with a bit of action as well. So it kept my interest. I'm looking forward to seeing more.
What
I
were you
enjoyed it.
taking shots at Hickman for during
Because
this
he
review,
used a
man?
couple of shots. Yeah, like I told you, I sat down for a while with Spider-Man. I marinate, and I've been thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I just had to say about this. Yeah, this is how I feel about it. This is how I feel about Hickman on a whole.
Hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed this book. Thanks, Glenn, for the recommendation. Lost Fantasy was right up my alley. It reminded me more of Dresden Files, and I haven't really seen anything new in terms of Dresden Files. So this was a real nice. I don't want to say replacement, but right in that, like we had mentioned, a hidden world, a modern world, fantasy, revisionist history. Yeah, it was really awesome. Good recommendation, Glenn, and people should definitely check that out. So if you're a fan of any of the books that Glenn mentioned, or things like the Dresden Files, this would be right your speed, I think.
Bro, you keep mentioning Dresden Files. I have to look over my shoulder. I don't want my wife to hear you because she might fall in love with you.
Your wife is your wife, man. But yeah, if he's a Dresden fan, that's my trade,
been-
man. I really love.
He's been boosting Dresden Files for as long as I know him. Years.
What, man? My wife, she has every one of his books on her bookshelf right now, and she's read them like more than twice. She's been trying to get our children to read them. She's been trying to get me to read them. I'm not opposed to them, but other things seem to be taking priority.
I do want to reread for me, yeah.
Okay, so I'm not getting too off track, but you like the show?
Not as much as the book. Let me say that.
Okay, but it wasn't horrible.
I think it was very much a product of its time. I think a new Dresden series, it didn't follow the books as closely, I think. But I think a Dresden File series by somewhere like Amazon would be amazing. Let me put it out in the universe. There we go.
It suffered from following up behind what's the Charmed and Buffy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't really watch it, to be honest, but it had that flavor.
Yeah. But since I think probably halfway through the Dresden Files, Jim Butcher actually started doing some graphic novels. So kind of as like prequels to like Harry's story. And I've seen more comic/graphic novels for Dresden Files than actual novels. So I don't know if he's pivoted to that direction. But his series is amazing. So check it out.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Who's up next? Michael, you had thoughts on the book. I didn't ask if you read it.
No, I haven't read it, but after that, description by Glen, I'll probably be hopping on that tonight when this is over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to go next?
So, yeah, with my selections, I read up with I've been following the One World Under Doom, and I really think we should get into that whole thing as a discussion at a later point, because
hail Dr. Doom.
Yeah, because I'm here wondering, like, okay, yes, he's taking over the world. Yes, he's technically a villain, but is he doing anything really wrong? And if the heroes stop him, then who's in the right? That's what this book is building up and making me feel. But apart from that, going into one of the stories for the One World Under Doom, I'm reading the Red Hulk books, because as long as it has Gamma in it, I'm there. Okay, I mean,
of course you are.
Of course,
you are.
Of course.
The boy's so predictable.
So basically, this whole thing starts off, or the book is covering that Ross finds himself a prisoner of Doom. And naturally, you would think, oh, so Doom wants a big red angry Hulk on his team. Just he wants a big red angry attack dog. But no, that's not what he wants from Ross. He wants Ross's strategic and military mind, because Doom has basically put together a wartime think tank comprising of incredibly smart and tactical strategists from all manners of military and private sectors and stuff like that. So he has Ross there. He also has Machine Man. He has Deathlock, which I wasn't expecting to see Deathlock, but he's there. And he has a couple other military movers and shakers and people like that, basically. And their entire premise is to think up every and any type of wartime scenario, situation, whether it be, a full-scale war or some covert operation, ambush tactics, whatever it is that they can think up, he wants them thinking it up so that he has countermeasures to anything anybody can throw at him. And that is basically how he's countering anybody's military operations or plans that any nation comes up with, because he has a think tank that is already thinking it up. And the thing about Ross is that Ross lives, eats, breathes, and sleeps war. That's all that runs through this man's head. So just by having him alone and his think tank, nobody can really go against him. And now Ross is trying to break out, and he successfully so far, led a breakout with him, Deathlock, and Machine Man, and one other dude named Riker. But, Riker was pardon the French, bit of a dick, and he got taken out. So it's just the three of them on the run now, trying to get to this nuclear power plant installation, because Ross has run out of gamma and he needs a recharge in order to bring the Red Hulk back into the fight. And I read that, and after I read that, I went back to the cover page because I wanted to see who was writing this, so I would have a name to put on the face that I would slap in my imagination, because I want to slap this man. It's like, okay, what is this thing you're trying to come up with now here, that Ross needs gamma to transform into Red Hulk? That's not how it works, sir. And I feel like the editorial department is not doing their job effectively. They're not editorialing enough. And I know it's editing, but excuse me, I'm not being polite with them. And I feel that the editorial department should have two categories, two separate chambers, because that is the best quintessential number that everything runs and flows and operates in, okay? The Chinese knew it. They created Taoism. You have the most important organs and, aspects of your body come in two, okay? You have two halves of your brain, two valves in your heart, two lungs, two ass cheeks. So we really need I need the editorial department to get their shit together and stop people from doing crap like this with characters. And apart from that, because now he's on the run, out of energy, or out of gamma radiation particularly, and Doom has basically just found out that there has been a prison break and decide he's going to go and handle this himself. Doom literally left a UN summit to go handle this. I'm like, oh, they dead. They dead. Like, not even with the A, it's just DED, dead. And I'm waiting to see what happens next week.
All right, well, tell us how you really feel. Whoa. Yeah, I'm interested in One World Under Doom, and I want to talk about it when it's all finished. We could discuss it, how it was as a whole. When it comes to the Hulk, if it's not Bruce Banner, I really don't give a shit. Sorry. So I didn't get a chance to read this, but I'm glad you liked it. Glen, Marc.
I skimmed it just out of interest. I think I read the first issue, and it read like candy to me. Like, there's no way any of this could seriously happen in my head. Like, one, how is the Red Hulk even captured and placed there? And two, like, this is Doom we're talking about here. Like, whoever it is that was writing this, I don't think they have a real good grasp on Doom. But then again, when I, step away from all of that and I just took the book as is, it's like a fun popcorn movie. It's like a fun popcorn comic book,
Well, let me ask you a question, because I was saying the same thing you said. This is sound like Doom to me. Would Doom need a think tank? Would he admit that he needs somebody else to come up with stuff for him? It doesn't sound like Doom to me either.
Nah, that don't sound like Doom.
But here's the thing, it doesn't sound like Doom, but I'm actually loving this direction for Doom, because in a sense, Doom always is centralized. He don't depend on anybody. He don't rely on anybody else. It's his power or nothing else at all. But now that he's literally conquering the world, he is using every resource. So it's not that he's dependent on them, it's that he sees it as a resource and he is using it to his utmost. So in that regard, I fully respect that. because I'm like, okay, he
Um,
may not know how to effectively do wartime strategy and all of that stuff. So he just grabbed everybody, slap inhibitor collars on them, and tell them, "You're my think tank." That's it.
um, do you really think that this is a direction for Doom? Because this is just a side book. This is not a main
It's a side
story.
book, but so far Doom's winning.
All I'm
I
gonna
just thought that it was interesting, just an interesting popcorn read, to be honest with you.
all I'm gonna say
It's
here
just
is
one arc and story of the entire thing. But yeah, that's just the one book.
I'm looking forward to seeing how Doom is defeated because I'm calling bullshit right now. He
See,
Doom is doing too many things right here. Okay,
I'm I'm not
and
even looking forward to being defeated. I'm looking forward to the consequences of defeating him. Because he is basically Glenn. You know how how you're always saying stuff about superheroes and they can't tackle real world issues. Doom is tackling real world issues. He's tackling medicine, education, division, classism, borders. All of these things are so that none of their governments or none of the governments in the world, the Marvel world, would ever touch or tackle. And he's making all of it accessible to the common man. So when they take down Doom and take away all of this stuff from people, like just the free medicine alone, going to be the consequence of that?
Well, I
Well,
guess
they
we'll
took
find out when actually. I mean, we've already seen um a major problem arise in the last issue of One World Under Doom. With Doom, his ego is so massive that he's so focused on running the world, he hasn't been doing what he's supposed to do. And there's about to be massive repercussions to that. So I can already see the string starting to unravel. So I just want to see. And I know Doom's motives are not altruistic at all. He has something else cooking. Some ulterior motive, something dirty working. But I guess we'll find out when that happens.
it's interesting that you said that, and I know we're going to leave that for when it's completed. But I will say at least this much, right? With Doctor Doom and the unraveling of things, I just think that it is what you call it again. I just think that it is sorry, I'm getting called away here. So you guys go ahead. I'll be back in a bit.
Well, if that's the case, okay, I'll just discuss briefly the other book I read, which was, it's like a series, but it doesn't feel like a series to me. It's called Godzilla versus America, and it seems to just be collective stories within one shots. So each one is a one shot about a different state so far, but there's collective stories within the one shot. So the one I've read so far is the Chicago one, which is the first one that came out. And it's just 4 short stories about different people's experiences facing Godzilla within the city of Chicago and stuff. And it's actually pretty funny. It's just great comedy to sit down and read. All of them is just nice little comical touches. And my favorite story was the third one, in which in which Godzilla is, coming to the city because he was fighting this space amoeba thing, whatever. And he basically got his ass whooped. And he was coming to the city to, recharge his energy. And one sneaky little low-life land developer saw it as a great opportunity to get rid of this suburb that he don't like because they want to rebuild it. So his plan was to lure Godzilla there to the suburb with super bright lights, turn off all the lights in the city, but turn on like some super bright lights in that particular section so that Godzilla goes there, and just the mere act of Godzilla going there, he will basically flatten that whole area and they can come back and rebuild it better. But the representative for that area found out about their plan and he countered it because the truck drivers they were using to transport the lights lived in that area. So once he told them what the people and them planning to do, they basically rerouted the lights into the rich people area, the same people who wanted to destroy their suburb. So now Godzilla ended up going there and flattened all of them the houses. So this is a really cheeky petty shit, but God, it was a fun story to read. It was just fun to read, and I liked it.
All right. I haven't read that either, but okay. Marijuana, just pause the Glen get up. They usually edit all this part.
I'm here, man. You guys
Oh, you back?
keep going. Sorry, I just got distracted with some family stuff.
No problem. Mark edit all of that, I guess. It was just telling us about Godzilla versus USA. I don't know if you read that.
I've seen it, but I haven't really dived into it. But it looks pretty interesting. The Godzilla stuff tends to look pretty fun.
I haven't been liking the Godzilla versus Marvel stuff, but I haven't read this one.
The Godzilla. When I saw somebody shared an image of Godzilla being covered by a symbiote.
Yeah, he was that. The other was the Godzilla versus Spider-Man book. So the books are set in different eras of Marvel comics. So this one was set when he first came back with the black costume, the symbiote, and they kind of diverged then from the main timeline because in this one, Peter realizes a lot earlier that the symbiote is alive, and it leaves him for Godzilla, and then eventually Godzilla loses it as well and finds Eddie Brock in the end, but it's a different type of, what's it called now again? God Venom or Venom God, as in Godzilla. The whole thing is completely ridiculous, but it was fun.
That Marvel book was disgusting.
It was stupid, but it was fun.
Is there like a Godzilla anniversary or something? Because Marvel is doing Godzilla, then there's this.
Well, remember all those
that
movies?
Mike
All these
mentioned.
movies came out recently, right?
I don't know.
So I guess they're capitalizing on it.
Ooh, yeah, that's my thought.
It's actually interesting. I watched an interview with Sal from Comic Pop, and the guy over at IDW who's responsible for the directions that the licenses that they take up and what they write and that sort of stuff. So it seems like you're right. The Godzilla -1 inspired it sort of revitalized the persons with the franchises and stuff like that, and they wanted to do things. But the thing is, I wouldn't say everything has been done before with Godzilla, but the Godzilla stories tended to be pretty repetitive, and they're looking to try something new. So they've given the guys at IDW some latitude to try new things, and the guys over at IDW, they've been keeping their eyes on what the big two has been doing. So they look at how the Absolute Universe popped off and what they've been doing over there in DC. They looked at the Ultimate Universe, how that's been received over at Marvel. And lastly, they looked at the Energon universe over at Image and sort of got an idea for what it is that they would like to do with Godzilla. So there's 3 titles coming out. Aside from the licensing stuff that they've worked out, allowing them to, do the crossovers with Marvel and DC and so on, what they've been doing, and just having fun with Godzilla, because according to him, he feel like comic books should that receive the blessing of the Godzilla people in them. And that should be popping off pretty soon. I think Free Comic Book Days around the corner. They'll be doing a preview issue, and then from there, the number one's coming out. You guys
Are we
there?
following?
Hello?
I'm just
Wondering where Wade is.
Oh,
Hey, Wade, you asleep?
Wade must have dropped sleep.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute. Sorry, my bad. I'm sorry.
You're getting old, man.
Yeah. I'm talking to myself. Right. All right. So yeah, that sounds good. Let's move on now to our main topic for tonight.
My review, my book. Hello.
Oh crap! My most sincere apologies. I told you you should have gone first. I forgot. My bad. Go ahead. Yeah.
No problem. I
Sorry.
actually made notes for this one, so hopefully I can get to them quickly. All right, so here we go. My book for this week, this episode, it's called String. Actually, the book number 5, which I believe is the end of the miniseries, came out this week. So String, it is 5 issues published by Mad Cave Studios. We've got Eisner Award-winning writer Paul Tobin on board, as well as art by Carlos Javier Olivares. I'm probably butchering that. Colors by Sarah Coella. probably also butchering that, and letters by Tom Esposito. So this book, I like it because it is, for me, very much in the vein of those procedurals like Castle or iZombie, where it's a procedural. We're following the main character, Yoon. She's a 25-year-old Korean American woman. But like something like iZombie, she has a supernatural or ability or a unique twist to the entire series. She can see the connections between people, the two specific types: blue strings, which connects sexual partners, and black strings, which connect murderers to their victims. So in the first episode, she realizes that the black string that connects to her, but she can't see where the endpoint is. So either she is going to be a murder victim or she's going to murder somebody. So the entire series shows you the journey of her trying to figure out where does this black string connect to. It also in the first issue establishes what her world is like. So she kind of makes her money either being a weird consultant for the police or kind of like a weird kind of like private investigator type thing. But because she can see the connection between like sexual partners, she can tell a wife if her husband is cheating and with who and that kind of stuff. So, that's her gig. But the entire series is about her trying to figure out where does black string lead to, and if she's going to kill somebody or somebody's going to kill her. So that's the entire series, that's the entire premise. I like it a lot because it feeds that like weird procedural show formula that I kind of like. And it's great. It is a supernatural thriller. There are elements of mystery and sci-fi in there. The visuals are kind of like this sketchy pastel colory type vibe, which I think works for it. It might not appeal to everybody. I know Wade can be a bit of an art snob. Is that fair, Wade? Anyway, so it's 5 issues. The series, the series ends now, but I think it was really good. I think it's a pretty strong offering from Mad Cave Studios. And if you are a comic book fan and you're looking for something that is accessible but isn't in like the whole superhero space, then I think String is a good choice. And I wouldn't be surprised if it gets like adapted into like a series or something. But overall, good fun.
Yeah, I read issue 1 of this when it first came out. And like you said, the art is sketchy and scratchy and does feel a little too loose and amateurish for my liking. It's not as tight, the heavy lines I like. But the story was actually so good that I just bypassed. I actually enjoyed the first one. I am not sure why I never got back to it again. I think there's too many books and I just kind of forgot about it and I got lost in the shuffle. But the premise was fantastic and I did enjoy the first one. And now you mentioned it, I know you told me that it's actually finished and I can read the whole thing in one binge. I'm going to start off on number 1 and just read the whole thing over.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Mike, Glenn, you all looked at this?
I'm going to follow it. I have it right there. It's in my queue. So now that you tell me, okay, 5 chapters, yeah, I could burn through that.
I was definitely judging this book by the cover. And it didn't quite appeal to me. So I just kind of skipped it.
Think you check it out now that Jason was giving it such a glowing review, or are you still not gonna?
I might give the first one, at least give it a read for the issue 1 and see what. Because I mean, you would actually said something that convinced me because knowing you and how persnickety you can be, right? If the story got you to ignore the art, then that's saying something.
That's right, yeah. The art is not a strong point. So, all right, well, that was our reviews. Again, make sure nobody has another review. We're going to move on now to... Okay, because I messed up Marc just now. We're going to move on to our main topic of discussion for tonight, which is sliding timescales versus growth, actual growth and aging. Now, we all read comics. We've been reading comics from the time we were kids. For me, it's been over 30 years. And I grew up, when I started reading comics, Peter Parker was older than me. And then we were the same age. And now I am like probably twice what his age is in the books. So while this keeps characters in the mind and the vision of new readers, Spider-Man's going for over 67 years now, I think it is 60 years. It also kind of retards their growth because we never see them.
Where did you get that?
Sorry, Mike, I didn't hear you.
That's his background audio.
Oh, okay. Right. We never see them grow old. We never see them get kids. We never see them get married for the most part. And then when they do get married, their marriages get undone. But anyway, we never see them pass on to the new generation. We never see that if the kids get powers. We never see stuff like that. So,
Do you mean the Ultimate Spider-Man then?
like Ultimate Spider-Man. But let's get somebody else writing that. Anyway, so my question to you guys is, which do you prefer? Do you prefer characters to stay where they are, or do you prefer them to age and grow? And if you age and grow them, how do you maintain readers that fell in love with these characters from a long time ago?
Ooh, I can't wait to dive into this. I've got notes and everything.
Well, how about it?
All right, so the topic is sliding timelines versus legacy mantles. So for those of you who are uninitiated, like Wade mentioned, most universes use a sliding time scale. So Tony Stark, for instance, he got his chest damaged by his own munitions somewhere like in the Vietnam War or whatever. And they keep kind of recycling that, pushing it forward. Each new conflict, that's what Tony Stark gets wrapped up into. But these characters are in a time bubble. They don't age, or if they do age, it gets reset every so often. So you have characters like Batman, Iron Man, Spider-Man, whoever. They're always the same general age as when they first were published, right? The other option is legacy, where the characters age, they pass the torch, new characters step into the roles, that kind of stuff. So for me, I'm on the legacy or the mantle side of things. I think that would be cool. I think it would be novel because you don't really see that happening in comics outside of a couple of throwaway stories or something like that. I think Generations, DC had a story arc called Generations where Superman and Batman kind of age in real time.
The best ever. I got it on my notes too. Let's go ahead.
We've got Marvel did one with Fantastic Four recently,
And Spider-Man.
and Spider-Man, where they were starting in the 60s and then rolling forward every issue or couple issues, a new decade for these characters, but it's not a mainline thing. So for me, I wouldn't mind seeing heroes that age and evolve and retire or even die permanently, but not in like a cheap shock value way that tends to happen, but in a way that provides real time, real consequences, and organic change. Now, for me, if I were doing this either with an established universe like DC or with something original, I would take an approach of icons and mantles. So, an icon would be like Clark Kent, or specifically Clark Kent as Superman, where the icon is singular, where there's only like one Clark Kent. But then Superman, the name, the S shield, the attitude and perspective, what the character stands for, the powers, even these would be all part of the mantle, and that is something that can be passed down, that multiple people can wear it over time. Now, DC has done this successfully before, where I think in the 90s, immediately after the death of Superman, there was the Reign of Superman story arc, and there were basically four pretenders to the throne. But John Henry Irons, later who became Steel, he's a perfect example for me of somebody who embraces a mantle, because Steel, as he was known like back in that initial storyline, Man of Steel, he was the only one of these four characters that wasn't saying that he was either Superman Reborn or Clark Kent Returned or some combination of that. So he built his own suit. He fought for justice like Superman. He stepped up to protect people, primarily his initial neighborhood. He wasn't trying to replace Clark, but he was doing his own thing to honor what he saw Superman stood for. So that is a perfect example of mantle energy, whereas this organic succession. No, there are real world factors that kind of play a part to this. So basically, publishers are largely there, especially the big two. They're there to protect their IP. So they do that best by kind of keeping these characters not only alive but kind of frozen in time. So you're not going to see Batman really retire. You're not going to see Spider-Man aging out or actually getting a job or actually, being involved with somebody who's not Mary Jane Watson. That kind of stuff. Um, because in the real world context, these names and costumes are trademarks. The characters themselves are under copyright, and these need to stay in use in order to stay protected. So for the big two and other publishers, storytelling becomes a reset machine. But if we go down the line of icons and mantles, the icons can evolve, they can change, can grow. The mantles will be keeping things active and fresh. So you can have a new character, let's say like John Henry Irons, who step in. You can have somebody like Miles Morales who step in. So that the IP, which these brands leverage to make money, they can stay alive without trapping the character narratively in amber. So you're gonna have legacy, but in a way that doesn't erase identity, or in a way that doesn't seem like race swapping or gender swapping, where it seems cheap and performative. Right. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. I fall more on the side of obviously keeping the characters alive and around and young. Part of that reason is because I like the creative ways in which the companies find to do it. In terms of DC, for instance, they created a multiverse. So you got Earth 2 and Earth 1. So you can explain why Superman looked this way back in 1940s and why he's this way in the 2000s. DC even went as far as to, I don't know if you read there was Superman Generations, and then DC did a Generations event recently, right after Death Metal, where they tried to establish something called, it didn't stick, but something called the linear verse, where in this particular universe, humans basically live for a lot longer than we do in our regular world. And so like Batman would stay vital for decades. And you would see the last page, I remember, had him in his golden age costume, to his silver age look, bronze age look, right down to the modern age. So the implication was that it's the same Batman existing from the 40s all the way down, but because he's living in this particular universe where the rules are different, he's been evolving over time. It's the same guy. So I like those creative solutions to the issue of keeping a character in a time bubble. Mantle's passing is fine too, but for me, we've rarely seen it work the way it has with characters like Wally West and Miles Morales, because certain characters you can't swap out permanently. You can't put Bruce Wayne out of that Batman seat. You swap in Dick Grayson for a while, but eventually you got to get back to Bruce Wayne. I don't think Batman would be as popular with somebody else wearing a cape and cold. I don't think it would survive. But so like for me, you need to keep the established characters around, even if you create Miles Moraleses and whoever else to sometimes be, or it could be a sideline character or on the side. But yeah, I don't want to see a scenario where characters actually age in real time and die and move on, because for one, these companies, you can't strike lightning. Lightning can't hit a million times like that. So you create a Spider-Man and you kill him off and bring in somebody else, a Peter Parker, it might not work. And you're just shooting yourself in the foot, in my opinion. But that's how I say it.
I don't know. Because we've seen it work. So Wally West is a good example. In terms of real-time publication, he was the main Flash for decades after Barry died in Crisis of Infinite Earths, which is in like the 80s. So he really got a chance coming to his own. And
Yeah, but that's because Barry sucked, though. You know what I'm saying? Barry was never interesting. So
Barry did suck. But again, like DC has done it. The original Green Lantern was Alan Scott. For the Silver Age, they introduced Hal Jordan. Yuck. But then
the characters got cycled out. So I mean, once you hit the Silver Age, those characters are cemented.
But again, you had Hal Jordan did the best thing ever by going nuts and becoming a villain, and he was replaced handily by Kyle Rayner, who again for at least a decade was the main Green Lantern, and that worked. until Geoff Johns decided to sideline a perfectly good character to bring back his favorite.
Okay, so let me just weigh in here and share my views on this, right? So, um, this is it is a complex situation. It's a complex topic that doesn't need to be complicated, and that's because there's elements to this conversation that is just unique to Marvel and DC mainline superhero comics, right? So when I was thinking about this topic, all the other beats and points that have been discussed throughout the ages keep popping up. And then I remembered a comic that is still ongoing that just solved the entire issue for me, which is Archie Comics. If you look at Archie Comics, Archie has been running from since what, the 1960s, 1950s,
1930s.
1930s.
Yeah.
To this day, the formula has not changed. This guy has been in high school for like what, 80 years, loving the same two girls, and it hasn't changed. He's still a teenager, hasn't changed. Have you looked at Archie comic book recently?
Yeah, I look
No.
at him a lot. They actually there's actually an Archie superhero book. He's Mr. Justice. They're doing all these weird um types of comics now along with the main lane. There's a superhero lane, there's a horror book and stuff like that. So I
But at
sometimes
least the
look at,
main line, at least the
yeah, the main
main
lane's
line.
definitely still there. Definitely still there.
You notice that
Uh,
they've incorporated modern technologies and
yeah,
sensibilities in
yep.
the comics,
Yeah,
but
there's
they did that without changing any of the core of this of Archie. They haven't changed. They've added characters. They've added characters to the mythos. They've brought in LGBTQ characters. They've done all sorts of stuff with Archie and his friends, but the core remains the same. If my great aunt picks up a Archie comic book today, she wouldn't miss a beat. Now I say all this because um, for the sliding time scale, that is necessary because you make characters, they become iconic, they become your flagship characters, and so on. There's money there, there's merchandising there, right? You don't want those characters to disappear, but at the same time, you don't necessarily need ongoing books for those characters to remain relevant. We see that in manga, that there's titles that have completed their runs and the merchandising for these characters still continue. Those characters are still relevant today, so we don't need that. So what is it about Marvel and DC that is different from everything else? It has to do with the way they go about publishing. It's a never-ending soap opera, right? You don't need to age the characters. What you need to do is keep away from things that age the characters. And if you do that, then you have an eternal thing. So I don't think it's that big a deal. But again, um, they've been doing these things where, well, in the past, we know that Marvel used to not date their events. So you remember when there'd be like 19XX, that sort of stuff. You, they didn't they would place them by the aesthetic of the artwork at the time. That's how we'll know. They'll be wearing bell bottoms or something. The fashion of the day is what would indicate what time they're in. But outside of that, no references, no real references to real world events and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I think we don't need to be aging them. We don't need to pass their titles on. However, there are times when we have it's almost in I wouldn't say involuntary. It's almost impossible not to have these things simply because of fan demanding it itself, or it just feels right. It's the natural progression, right? So we've seen time and time again these characters, they would have children, and from time they have kids, we know what's going to happen. They're going to get sent into an alternate dimension, and then they're going to be forced aged up and that kind of stuff. And we've seen it recently with Jonathan Kent. But It's a shame when that happens, but again, sometimes it happens out of necessity, right? But as much as possible, we should keep these characters away from these things that do date them. Keep them away from these types of events. I know sometimes it is hard not to, but as you guys mentioned again, that's the reason why it is we have alternate universes. We could have those characters do those activities or engage in those activities in an alternate timeline and not necessarily affect the mainstream. And in terms of passing on mantles and so on, I'm not a big fan of that. Even if you are a legacy character, I don't think they should be allowed to take on that mantle. I don't think mantles should exist. Maybe in the case of how should I put it? In the case where like there's a secret identity kind of thing, and that character is embedded in the world, their world and their city. So like a character like Zorro, I can see that becoming a mantle, because it's not about the man underneath, it's about the symbol, what it represents, right? What the Zorro character represents. So I can see that becoming a sort of legacy kind of vibe. Maybe possibly for Batman, if handled right. But the thing is, Batman's character is tied to Bruce Wayne. That it's just tied to everything about Bruce Wayne. So it might be a bit harder, but we've seen it with like Nightwing. He's a legacy of Batman, but he's not Batman. So they can get their own titles. They can be their own thing. And they share in the history of whoever their mentor was or whoever legacy that they're continuing. So I see it as that. And lastly, something can be said as well for the changing of the guard completely. I've been reading a Korean manhwa called Nebula Civilization. And from the start, we follow a character and how it is that he's guiding his people and building a community, which eventually becomes they're building up a civilization and they're warring with other factions and so on. And he took them from a nomadic lifestyle into settling down and establishing themselves. And his story ended with a noble sacrifice that made things it set the path for greater development of his people. And then there was a time skip. There was a 300-year time skip. And then we get to see what his legacy was like, who his the generations that came before him, and how his people and his city evolved into a nation. And we get to see the new players, the new main characters, take up the roles and so on, and what the world looked like at that point in time. And that is something that they don't play around with ever in like Korean manhwa, which is like fast consumption. You very rarely get to see stories that approach their narratives that deeply. But it was enough to impact me, and it came to mind when I was also thinking about this thing about like legacy and how do we pass on and how do we move on with these characters. But by and large, the sliding time scale, it works. It works very well if you keep away from real world things and anything that date them. I think mantles are something that should be used very sparingly, and the characters should be allowed to evolve. You can have important changes happen to them, but also you have to consider the time scale when you're making those sorts of improvements.
Right?
Okay, sorry. I was making the same mistake you just did a little while ago where I start talking and then I realize my mic's mute. But with regards to that, I personally believe in a mixture of immortal and legacy, because I believe certain characters, there'll just be no way to pass them down and make them still relevant. Like characters like Batman and like Superman and stuff, you can't pass down that mantle, because as we read them for the person behind it. We read Batman for Bruce Wayne. We're not reading Batman to see somebody else underneath the cowl. It's Bruce Wayne or nothing. like saying you can cast somebody else to be Captain Jack Sparrow other than Johnny Depp. It's just not going to work. But at the same time, you can have these characters are too big, like Glenn said. They've become too iconic to really pass on their mantles. So what I more believe in is legacy characters. Because with legacy characters, you can build them up in the foundation of the originals or their mentors and all of that, but you can also completely go differently with them. You don't have to build them the same or like the others. Batman has raised, what, 4 or 5 disciples? None of them have turned out like him. And that's for the better. That's totally for the better. In a sense, even Batman himself sees like Dick or Nightwing as being better than him. And he wants that for all of them. He doesn't want them to become him. He wants them to become better than him. And I don't want to see, legacy characters trying to take on the mantles of their peers, because to me, you're supposed to become better than that person one day. And if you take on the mantle, you never grow. You're stuck at that thing. You're there now. You're supposed to be this because this mantle stands for this, and you can't really go beyond it. So I believe it should be like a solid mixture of, you leave iconic, immortal characters as they are, leave them like that, maybe age them up, actually improve them in terms of progress or stuff like that, or personal wise, but you don't have to change them too much outright. And legacy characters, you can do so much more with them, and you can make them bigger and better. So that's my kind of 2 cents on that.
I just want to mention I always find it a little weird too, especially how DC does it when they had what they did with John. They had an adult John, but they didn't do it. They actually would send another dimension where he aged somewhere and came back, as opposed
he went
to what
to Earth. He ended up on Earth,
It was
where
Earth
he
2 or
was
Earth
stuck
3?
in.
Earth 3
Huh?
with the Crime Syndicate. Wasn't it Earth 3 with the Crime Syndicate? I
The
think that'd
Crime
be Earth 3.
Syndicate is Earth
No,
2.
they're
I
Earth 3.
remember it being with Ultraman.
Right there, Crime Syndicate has always been traditionally Earth 3, unless it's changed in the last couple of years. Earth 2 is you just
It was Earth 3 with the Crime Syndicate.
right, yeah,
It was Earth 3.
right.
So he ended up on Earth 3 with crime boss Superman, where he was stuck in a volcano for 5 years, basically acting as Ultraman's shrink, and somehow that turned him gay. I don't know what happened there. You see, I'm getting upset thinking about it now.
All right, we can clearly go edit out. Mark, you can't do that. We got listeners.
Wait, y'all give me so much work to do though.
Hey, but
Please,
he can't say that. Right? We trying to stay all progressive and stuff, right?
I am all for progression if that is what the character was built or designed or created to be. But
Right.
when you decide to hit me with Asian driving school left turns, how am I supposed to handle that? With no warning.
Let's stay on course. Let's not deviate too much here, right? But Wade was making a point. Wade?
Yeah, I was just saying that they try to explain that aging up in terms of doing that. Whereas we have something with Batman, which is always strange and nobody can ever sort it out. But we just glance the other way. When Batman started and Dick Grayson was about 10 years old, Bruce would have been maybe mid-20s, the oldest, or the youngest. And so what?
Around 24, 25.
Right, sure. Okay. So Dick has aged up. Dick is now an adult. Batman has taken on 3 or 4 other Robins. And Dick has to be around where Bruce was at the time. So Bruce would technically be in his 40s, almost pushing 50, but he's still a man in his prime in his mid-30s at the most. So it's just strange how they do it. They do it with the Flash as well, Barry and Wally. They do it with the Green Lanterns. Hal has been whatever for however long. They do it with Green Arrow, Speedy, Arsenal. All the kids tend to grow up and catch up to the adults, but the adults don't get any older. So I just find that ability sliding time scale a little weird. Actually, Marvel does it too, because you got Reed and their kids. Even the Avengers, all the young characters, the New Warriors, everybody comes and grows up, but the main characters always stay the same age. So it's a little strange how they decide to age up characters, but keep certain ones the same age. I don't know why they don't like kids, but
Here's the thing, right? Yes, so it ties into what I was saying earlier, where there's things that would date the characters, and children definitely do. And I think that's part
Yeah,
of the
that's a
main
good point.
reason why it is that they tend to avoid allowing superheroes to have families, to get married, to have children, because then now you're gonna have to deal with that, unless you plan on just letting the children remain children. But the thing is now that creates its own problems because not many people know how to write children, right? As adults, children grow up very quickly, right? They mature very quickly. And so they themselves, by virtue of growing, would date the characters. So then that creates that issue. But here's the thing though, all of this becomes an issue if you think about it. If you just allow the stories to be and just enjoy them, I think that personally, my advice to like Marvel and DC, ignore trying to make sense of the situation. Just tell the stories. The fans will let it make sense in their own head. We're very good at coming up with rationalizing stuff. You listen to Michael long enough, Michael can rationalize any bit of stupidness that happens, right? But you let it be and let the story breathe and be what it is, and just leave the heavy lifting to the fans.
Fed and complimented.
So what about Mark? Mark, you have anything else to add?
Nah, not really. I guess I'm kind of just disenchanted by the status quo for a lot of comics, and I do think that the gender bending and the gender swapping that is often the vehicle or the vehicles for the introduction of new characters does the characters, the original characters, their legacies or mantles, whatever you want to call them, more of a disservice. We've had successes. So like Wally West, I think, is a perfect example, especially in the modern age, of what was a legacy character, a sidekick coming into his own. I honestly believe that the return of Barry Allen was a mistake because it completely derailed the trajectory and the development that Wally had as a character. But also, I think that having new characters organically carry the mantle provides a lot of, let's call it, transmedia potential. So for some people, John Stewart as Green Lantern is the only Green Lantern they know because they would have watched the Justice League Unlimited cartoons from back in the day. You know, that they may not have read the comics, they don't understand what the or have any connection to the source material. So there is, I think, a real case to be made for new characters carrying mantles, because you do get those different perspectives, but it is what it is.
I think it's me being such a X-Men fan why it is that I'm not keen on the idea of mantles. Everybody should be their own thing and to be individuals, carving out their own space within the world with their own identity and stuff like that. The whole idea of a mantle to me is where what the character represents, the character has now become a symbol and they have transcended what they've set out to be. And so this thing that they are now becomes an institution in and of itself and so endures beyond that particular character, right? So there must always be a Batman. There must always be a Superman. But why? Why? Why can't there be something else that is inspired by Superman? We have Wolverine, and all the progeny, all the snicket people and them. But they don't all have to be Wolverine, although at some point in time they all wore the name Wolverine. They carried the name Wolverine for a bit, but they don't need to be that. Is Dakin, right? X-23, Laura Kinney, even though now they're forcing us to accept her as Wolverine, is pretty nonsensical, right?
Did she have another name at some point? She'd have another name?
No, it was just Laura Kenny
And then
X23.
23. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was another one.
X23 was the name designated to her because she was
And
a lab.
I love that name. X23 sounds so cool. I love it.
Yeah, I mean that was her name when she was in the lab when she was created, and then when she was adopted, her adopted mother named her Laura, and she took on her last name Kinney, right, to show that she's been adopted and stuff like that. And then there's the last one, Honey Badger, right? She's not Wolverine, but she's like Laura, a clone, right? So Scott has children, and none of those children are Cyclops the second and Cyclops the third. They're their own characters. So I think these characters need to be their own thing. I wouldn't want to see Richard Parker become another Spider-Man. Give him his own name. You know what I'm saying? But anyway.
I guess so. You said it's a marketing thing. They're capitalizing on the name. So why create somebody called, I don't know, the Mongoose or whatever when you can have another Batman? I mean, as people see the casual fan sees the Batman title on the shelf. Let's get Batman. So it's easier to do that than to create brand new characters altogether, unfortunately.
But then that creates the problem that we have right now, right? Where
Correct.
people they become disenchanted with the stuff because then they'll tell you they don't want another Batman. They don't want a black Batman. They don't want an Asian Batman. They want Bruce Wayne Batman. But if Bruce Wayne trains somebody else or somebody steps in and is inspired by Batman, let them be inspired and let them be their own thing. Let us get a Nightwing, not Batman Jr.
Yeah, fully agree. Okay, so that was good. Let's have a vote. So I, for one, fall on the side of keeping the sliding time scale. I think who else is there? Me, is only Gibson on the other side, or
Mike is somewhere in the middle.
Glen is over here. Me, I think. So it's just you. So yeah, you lose.
I probably stand alone.
Okay. What's his name though? Jon Snow. Okay.
Just
Okay, remember he was standing alone. Yeah.
wasn't there a song that goes like that? I
Stand alone. Yeah, Godsmack. Yeah.
Godsmack, yeah.
Godsmack. Yeah. All right. So okay. So moving on. As you know, we are sponsored by Skylark Media and Alluhwi Comics. So we are going to talk about Alluhwi Comics, and we're going to talk about a particular title that we all read. Gibson, this is your baby, so you know what I mean. So you tell us about it, and then we'll talk about it.
All right, sure. So, a bit of background. Alluhwi Comics, if you are hearing this for the first time, Alluhwi Comics is a platform that I've led the development of. The idea initially was to provide a pipeline for Caribbean creators to take their comic book stories to a wider audience. Since then, we've sought to expand that beyond simply Caribbean creators, and we are intended to serve similar creators from similar backgrounds, so like small island developing states, people that don't have the opportunity that would be available in industry hubs like North America or Europe or the Asia Pacific market. So that's it in a nutshell. This book that we're talking about here, it is by Three Quarters Comics, which is headed up by the dynamic brother duo of Chris and Wendell Riley. So, Terror of the Midnight Robber, which you can get, yes, this is a plug, on shop.alluhwicomics.com. It is created by Trinidad and Tobago creative duo and publisher, Wendell and Chris Riley. And it's also interesting because it takes a Trinidadian folklore character and brings it into the comic book space. So, Terror of Midnight Robber #1. This was actually the second printing of this book from way back in February. Speaking subject correction, Alluhwi Comics is one of the few places where you can actually get it. You can actually buy this book. So that's kind of cool, something that we are proud of. But this book has always been a hit in the a bit of a cult classic in the Caribbean comic space. Like I said, for about more than a decade now. It is set in Trinidad and Tobago, and it introduces the Midnight Robber, which is, as I mentioned, an iconic figure from TNT folklore, reimagined as this dark supernatural force. So, this comic is definitely for mature readers, and it is a blend of folklore with some gritty, visceral, violent action. As mentioned, the story art and lettering are by Chris Riley. The script is by Wendell Riley and Bruce Lay. Publisher is Three Quarter Comics, and this was originally published back in 2013. Basically, in short, we start with this shadowy figure playing a guitar in a tree, and it moves on to a group of people, some friends who are on a hike in the northern range of Trinidad and Tobago. They get ambushed, things go terribly wrong. One of the characters, Rick, he actually gets murked, and the spirit of the Midnight Robber possesses his body and turns it into a vessel for this ancient being, spirit, creature. And then the creature goes on to kind of save the friends, slaughter some, criminals, and it ends with the Midnight Robber now having inhabited the body of Rick, trying to figure out, why he did the things he did, and figure out his place in the world. I want to also add here that this book is one in a 5-book series, so there's definitely more of this story to experience and enjoy. So, if you are looking for something that reimagines Caribbean folklore for a modern audience, then Midnight Robber #1 is definitely your speed. It mixes supernatural horror with gritty real world issues, all in a delicious wrapping of Trinidadian culture. The art, the story, the atmosphere, it all makes it a very unique comic, and it gives you a new and chilling perspective on an iconic Caribbean folklore character. So, if you're into folklore driven horror with that unique Caribbean spin, definitely check out Midnight Robber, and that's available on our store at shop.alluhwicomics.com. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it was like kind of like Zorro cross with Ghost Rider. I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't sure what to expect. It's not Marvel or DC or it's something with a big budget and big names attached to it. But it was strong. The art had a 90s flavor to it. The shading and everything, black and white was good. The story was the it was weird seeing a comic written in a Caribbean accent. It kind of threw me off because I'm not accustomed, obviously, but it was well done. I'm really impressed with the guys. Are the other issues on the site as well, or is this issue 1?
Just issue 1 for now, but the other issues
Just
are
issue 1 for
coming
now.
very, very soon. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I enjoyed it. It was good. I wish it was in color, but I guess that would be a lot more. Yeah, very well done for regional talent.
In regards to that title, Midnight Robber, I think the first thing was the art on the cover is what drew me in most definitely. The art in the book, not quite up my speed, but there are moments in there where it tends to be a bit menacing, and it works very well, especially for the tone that the book is going for. I enjoyed I was I was getting a first-hand experience into what I guess Trinidadian culture is like. I love listening to Caribbean people talk, various accents and so on throughout the Caribbean. So Trinidad is amongst one of my favorites to listen to, especially Trinidadian ladies. I find that they do justice to the the accent and the dialect. But yeah, it was as Wade said, definitely get that Zorro slash Ghost Rider feel to it, And as a fan of Caribbean mythology, I enjoyed being exposed to even more. So I've never, until then, I have never heard of the Midnight Robber. And yeah, as a introductory book, as a first issue to a series, I think they did a pretty good job. They established the characters, We got straight into the action. There wasn't much wasting time where that was um, set, and they left us with enough of a mystery to hook us into, being curious about where the story goes and what's more for this Midnight Robber. Like, how is he? What's his purpose now? That's my main question. So yeah.
Well, thank you for being here for yet another episode of the Four Outsiders Comics podcast by Skylarking Media. Skylarking Media is the parent company of Alluhwi Comics, which is the first homegrown or regionally grown comic book publishing and distribution platform. And again, we are catering to creators from small islands like us here in the Caribbean. If you want to support this podcast, again, listen to this podcast. New episodes are going to be uploaded to our YouTube on Mondays by Monday night, let's say 8 p.m. Tell your friends for sure. And of course, head over to our online store, shop.alluhwicomics.com, to purchase any of these books that we have. We have books available in digital as well as in print. We got Midnight Robber in digital, and look out for the rest of that 5-issue series as well. So, on behalf of my fellow hosts, Wade, Glenn, and Michael, this has been episode 2 of the Outsiders Comic Podcast.